Hi, it's Lucy, and today I'm here to do a video on my top 10 books of the decade. So, yes, this video is pretty late. Most people put this video up at the end of December or January. Yes, it's March. What are you gonna do about it? Are you gonna fight me? No? Okay, so we're still here. I'm here to talk about the top 10 books that I read over the past decade from 2010 to 2019. That makes 10 for some reason. Some people have been doing this video differently than I am, but I decided that this is the way I wanted to do it. And you guys also decided for me because I did a poll on my community tab a while ago when I was planning to make this video more timely, and then I didn't, so yeah. But you guys voted for me to do a book that I read every year in the decade as opposed to a book that was published every year in the decade. So I'm doing a book for each year that I read that book in, if that makes sense. So they weren't necessarily published that year. And most of them I don't think were published that year. So keeping that out of the way, I'm just choosing my favorite book from each year. This was a little hard, especially in the years before I started this channel. I have always had Goodreads, not always, but I did have Goodreads for the whole decade. It's just that I started my Goodreads in 2009, but 2009 and 2010, I didn't know to put dates on the books that I read, I guess. I don't know. But a lot of the books that I read, I didn't have a date on them. So I know that I read them sometime in the past, but I didn't have a real date, and I did a lot of guesstimating. And some of the books I just ended up deleting off my Goodreads because it really bothered me not to have dates on some of the books. So I could have had a different favorite book for 2010, but if I did, I feel like I would remember it, right? So I don't know. So my favorite book for 2010 was Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson. I read this because our teacher recommended it to me, I think, or recommended it to the class. I think we were supposed to read it in 8th grade, but then we ended up not reading it. Honestly, the fact that I went to Catholic school and this book was recommended, I find really odd. So this follows a girl named Melinda who was raped at a party. This was the big end of the summer party, the whole school was there. It's a very important party, but because of what happened to her, she ends up calling the cops. And people don't really know why she called the cops, so she ends up becoming very outcasted at school. And obviously after what happened to her, Melinda feels very lonely and nobody wants to be her friend after her ruining the party and everything like that. And so she starts off the school year, her first year of school, very isolated, and she continues to get more isolated and basically stops speaking, hence the title. And we follow her journey as she comes to terms with what happened to her. Yeah, I love this book when I've read it. This obviously has a trigger warning for rape. This book made me fall in love with Laurie Halse Anderson. I read most of her books in high school because I just loved her writing style. I loved the way she wrote about the topics she wrote about. This was a very important part of my high school / end of middle school reading life. So if you haven't read it already, it's a very popular book. I would recommend it. The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. This is probably on a lot of other people's lists because this is a very popular book. It was made into a movie. This follows a boy named Charlie who is starting high school and trying to make his way through his freshman year. He does this by writing letters. The book is an epistolary style novel, so he's writing letters to you, the reader, but he's writing them to someone he calls friend. They are all started with the words dear friend. I just love this story. I don't know what else to say. I watched the movie. The movie is really good and a pretty good adaptation. The screenplay for the movie is written by the author, so yeah, it was bound to be good, but in case you were worried and you needed me to tell you to watch it, you can watch it. Charlie's is a wallflower basically, and it's about him kind of coming out of his shell, making new friends, and it's just really lovely. I love this story. Yeah, so this was the book for 2011. I don't know if I mentioned that. My favorite book of 2012 was The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. Once again, this is probably on a lot of people's lists. This is a very popular book, and I'm no exception. I loved it. This follows a girl named Liesel. It takes place during World War II in Nazi Germany, and Liesel's family dies, and so she ends up getting adopted or taken care of, I guess, by this family. And she starts to form a little rebellion of her own where she starts stealing books. The thing about this book is that it is told from the point of view of death, so it has that whole element to it. We see Death's thoughts on everything that's happening. In this book, Death isn't really a god, he just is. So he's just like a witness, he doesn't control it. And so that's really fascinating. And also in this story, Liesel's family ends up taking in a Jewish man, hiding a Jewish man. So we also have that to deal with in the story. And This is the first book I ever cried reading. I remember sitting at my kitchen table and just bursting into tears when a specific thing happened. And my dad is looking at me like, what's going on? Because it was like a dining table or something and he was like doing something, I don't know. And I was just like crying and continuing to read the book. So yeah, that memory will always be attached to this book. I am really due for a reread of this. If you haven't read it yet, I don't know how to convince you. I'm sure so many other people have told you to read it already. So if you haven't read it yet, I assume it's for a reason, and hopefully it's a good one. Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. Once again, every book on this list is honestly pretty popular. I guess I just read popular books, I don't know. But once again, this is very popular, it had a movie. I've heard the movie is not that good, I never watched it. This was the favorite book of 2013, and I do have a couple of books on this like favorite books of the decade list that are just here because of the year that I read them, if that makes sense. So 2013 wasn't as remarkable as I guess it could have been, and so this was my favorite book of that year, but this wouldn't make my top 10 life list, I feel like. So I don't remember a whole lot about it. I just remember that it felt very action-packed. It's very compulsively readable, which is why it's so popular. I never continued on in this series because I've heard that it really goes downhill. This follows Ender Wiggins, who I think he's at like military school or something, but basically the government and the Earth has been fighting this war with this alien species called the Buggers for a very long time, and Ender is a military genius where they start training him at a very young age. So this book follows him training to like end this war with this alien species, and yeah, that's what the book follows. It's like I said, it's very action-packed, very interesting. It does make you think a lot about war, the cost of war, what people are really fighting for. My favorite book of 2014 was United We Spy by Ali Carter. This is the 6th book in the Gallagher Girls series. The Gallagher Girls series is a book series about teenage girls who go to spy school. That's what it is. It was really good. I really loved reading it when I was younger, and this was the 6th book. And usually, I feel like as I've grown older, I've started to hate finales, but in the old times, I used to love finales. I almost always gave a finale 5 stars. So this was back then. And yeah, I really liked how everything was wrapped up. I was so excited to be reading this series. It's about girls who go to a spy school. It's an all-girls spy academy. And then the first book is more of a self-contained story, and then the rest of the series there's like a bigger conspiracy that's unfolding and we get to see it. I loved seeing all the cool gadgets that they were using. I loved seeing the spy techniques that they had going on, and yeah, that's my love of the series. My favorite book of 2015 was Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. Once again, very popular. This follows a girl named Kath who is a Simon Snow fangirl. Simon Snow is like this world's interpretation of Harry Potter or something. It's like not a clone of Harry Potter, but it's a similar kind of book where lots of people are super fans of the series. It's very popular. And yeah, and so Kath, our main character, writes fan fiction for Simon Snow, and we follow her as she goes through her first year of college. And when she's getting ready to start the first semester, she finds out that her twin sister Ren doesn't actually want to room with her, and she signed up for a new roommate, and so Kath ends up with a random roommate. She is dealing with anxiety because she thought she was going to have this comfort person there with her, and she doesn't, and so she kind of sinks into fan fiction, and she's also struggling to adjust to school and everything. And I just really liked it. I loved it. The romance in here is really adorable. I really liked reading the fan fiction Kath wrote, and I liked seeing Kath as a character. I read this at the end of my freshman year of college. I kind of wish I had read it before I started school. I don't know how I would have seen it differently if I had read this before I started school, because my freshman year of school was, nerve-wracking and things like that, but I didn't really have an issue making friends. I wouldn't say I'm very outgoing, but the people who I lived with and were around me were like pretty conscious of trying to be friendly and make friends, so it wasn't that hard for me to do that. So I didn't have a similar experience to Kath, but I just liked reading about someone who was my age, who had gone through something that I had just gone through and going through your freshman year of college. And this also got me back into reading because when I was in school, I had not read anything. I read nothing my first semester of my freshman year of college. I read like 4 or 5 books during my winter break, and then I read nothing the second semester. So I was kind of in a big reading slump. I don't know, I don't really believe in reading slump, but if I were to say I was in one, then that would have definitely been one. And so this was the first book that I read after I finished school for the semester, so this kind of brought me back to reading. This is kind of the reason I started BookTube, but this is what brought me back to reading, which made me discover BookTube on YouTube. So yeah. My favorite book of 2016 was Illuminated by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This is the first book in a trilogy. We won't talk about the end of the trilogy, but this first book I loved. This mostly follows a girl named Katie who had just broken up with her boyfriend Ezra, and then the next day her planet is destroyed. So because of this, the people who are remaining end up getting on ships to try and find help. But on the ships to try and find help, they are being followed by the people who came and attacked their planet because they don't want those people to get out, for other people to find out that they attacked their planet. There's like a whole conspiracy going on. If you read it, you'll know. And it's told in like a mixed media format. This was one of the first books I think I read in that kind of format. I thought it was so good. I loved this book. I thought it was a great introduction to the series. It's still one of the best first books in a series that I've ever read. I just cared for the characters so much, and this was the first series in a while that I had gotten into, like at the beginning, that I had followed. I don't know, I just loved reading this story. I loved the mixed media format. I loved the characters. I loved following them. I have read it twice now, and I loved it both times. I did not think it got worse in like the second time. I still recommend the first book in the series. The third book in the series was a letdown for me, but this is about the best books that I read, and Illuminated was one of them. The Queen of the Tearling by Erica Johansson. This is once again the first book in a trilogy. We follow a girl named Kelsey, who is the 19-year-old supposed to be queen of her kingdom. She had been hidden away until she came of age because her rival kingdom doesn't want her to be on the throne. This book follows her on her journey to her kingdom, so that she can rightfully take the throne, and we see all of the obstacles that are in their way on the journey and what she will have to come and face as she has to try and fight the Red Queen, who is the queen of the enemy kingdom. And yeah, it's really, really intriguing. There's a lot of political intrigue in this series, so this is a fantasy series. There is some magic. I thought it was really fascinating in the first book. Once again, this is a series where the third book left something to be desired, but once again, this is about the favorite books, and the first book was a favorite book. There's just something about this book and the series as a whole that really engaged me, and that's why it's on this list, because I just could not stop thinking about it after I finished the book. I read the second book really near when I read the first book, which hardly ever happens for me. Like, I felt like I needed the second book, which is very rare for me. So just that whole experience makes it the best book of that year. My favorite book of 2018 was Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. Once again, the first book in a trilogy. The third book is not out yet. We follow Zele, who lives in a kingdom where 11 years prior to the beginning of this novel, magic was taken away, and during that process, all the magic users were killed and only people called diviners were left behind. Zele is a diviner, which basically means that she would have had the ability to do magic if they hadn't taken away magic. And something happens, and so she ends up having to go on this journey to try and bring magic back because she finds out that's possible, and so they are trying to do that. And yeah, it's just so great. I feel like I've talked this book to death in every video that I talk about it, because I talk about it a lot. I recommend it a lot. I did a whole reading vlog about this book not too long ago, and yeah, so this book was very important to me. I loved the whole process of reading it, and it was very important to me that this cast was all Black. I really love that. So if you are interested and I haven't already convinced you to read it, maybe this will convince you to read it. I don't think so at this point. And finally, my favorite book of 2019 was Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. This is the second book in the Six of Crows duology. Six of Crows walked, so this book could run. That's basically my whole overview of the series. I just did a series review. Well, I did a review of all my completed series in 2019, and this was completed in 2019, so I did talk about it in that video, as well as like my original wrap-ups that I did last year. So if you're interested in those, they'll be linked. I just love this because I love the characters so much, and I feel like that's why everyone loves it, because the characters are so amazing and you feel for them so much, and as well as the fact that this was very action-packed. I loved seeing all the plots that were formed, the plans that were executed. Everything just felt so smart, and I loved this. So I'm really running out of daylight here, so that's the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any opinions about any of the books that I mentioned, leave a comment down below. Let me know what were some of your favorite books of the past decade. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel because I make more videos where I talk about books, and hit the notification bell so you can be notified whenever I do post a video. Follow me on my social media. I have Twitter and Goodreads and Instagram. If you want to see pictures of my cat, follow my Instagram. I think that's it for this outro. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.